Merry Christmas, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I hope that Santa Claus came down your chimney and gave you everything that you could possibly want or imagine. Now, before we get too far along in this video, I want to, of course, let you know that this is going to be a very special Christmas video. I'm going to read to you a poem of Lovecraft's and two short stories by Lovecraft, The Festival and The Strange High House in the Mist. Now, both these stories are two personal favorites of mine, and as you can see, I'm in the adequate dress code for the Grand Library. And yes, we're in the secret room that Elvis Presley himself thought I didn't know about, but we like to let Elvis think that he knows more than he does. Of course, I know about this chamber. I've been the one renovating the house. Who do you think's been paying for the renovation of the Grand Hall and the Grand Library? Of course, it's your boy Gill-boy here. Anyways, don't worry about it. Don't worry about the finite details and how all these videos interconnect. It's really not that serious. But I thought before, excuse me, before we get into all the H.P. Lovecraft and the horror content of this channel, I would like to read to you some iconic ancient Christmas carols. I know Elvis flawlessly covered Jingle Bells and O Christmas Tree and some other songs that hopefully have been uploaded. I know Jerry's been hard at work at editing, so maybe not all the videos will be there. But I digress. We're going to read some of the final Christmas carols from this tome. Just to kind of get us in the mood for the Christmas season, which is today. And, today marks the 12 days of Christmas. So I hope for the coming days that you will enjoy visiting the Grand Library. We will have some kind of Christmas themes from here on out, but for the most part, a lot of it will end on, this day, Christmas Day. So anyways, here's the illustrious art from Diane Good from the Christmas Carol book. Look at that. It's just so peaceful. It just really is. But anyways, whence comes the rush of wings? Whence comes this rush of wings afar, following straight the null star? Birds from the woods in wondrous flight, Bethlehem seek this holy night. Tell us, ye birds, why come you here, into this stable poor and drear? Hastening we seek the newborn King, and all of our sweetness music bring. Angels and shepherds bring of the sky, come where the Son of God doth lie. Christ on earth with man doth dwell, join the shout, Knoll, Knoll. So the next carol I'd like to read is Away in a Manger. And just appreciate that art for a second, and then I'll read you the lyrics of this beautiful carol. I'm from the South, and here at the Lagoon, there's not too many people because as soon as they see Gill-boy and Gill-man, they scream away in fear. And yes, I have the tie. It finally came in, so we're in dress code appropriate, even in the sacred chamber, which of course, if you're not dressed appropriately, you're just not allowed. But anyways, I digress. What I was trying to say is this song, Away in a Manger, is very beautiful and very appropriate for, of course, this Christmas day when Christ our Lord was born. So without further ado, here is Away in a Manger. Away in a manger, no crib for a bed, the little Lord Jesus laid down his sweet head. The stars in the bright sky looked down where he lay, the little Lord Jesus asleep on the hay. The cattle are lowing, the baby awakes, but little Lord Jesus no crying he makes. I love thee, Lord Jesus, look down from the sky, and stay by my bedside till morning is nigh. Be near me, Lord Jesus, I ask thee to stay, close by me forever, and love me, I pray. Bless all the dear children in thy tender care, and fit us for heaven to live with thee there. Beautiful carol. But of course, one of my favorite Christmas carols of all time would have to be that of Silent Night. And I honestly feel like I filmed this video without having a beautiful manger behind me, but I felt like the Christmas tree would be sufficient enough. And of course we got, my father, Gilman, behind, harboring a Coca-Cola, which is, contrary to Elvis Presley's opinion, the official soda of Christmas. So I hope you enjoy yourself a Coca-Cola. And for you, Mr. Presley, who I very much respect, a Pepsi. So without further ado, I would like to read Silent Night. And, Bing Crosby has a great song of this. Frank Sinatra has a great song of this. Of course, my personal favorite is Elvis Presley himself. But I know other people may think contrary to my opinions, and that's wonderful. So I hope that you listen to a better version of the song, or your favorite version of this song, on this beautiful Christmas day. So without further ado, allow me, Gill-boy, to read it to you. Silent Night. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright. Round yon virgin, mother and child, holy infant so tender and mild. Sleep in heavenly peace, sleep in heavenly peace. Silent night, holy night, shepherd first saw the sight. Glory steam from heaven afar, heavenly hosts sing Alleluia. Christ the Savior is born. Christ the Savior is born. And that's truly the reason for the season. Now, this primarily being a horror channel, we're going to start discussing Lovecraft. And we know that Lovecraft was a man who entertained Christianity, but subverted those doctrines for his own. And not to snuff out the Christmas spirit, because that's impossible to do, because all things are possible through Christ Jesus. But we are going to read some of one of my favorite Lovecraft poems. Now, Lovecraft was a unique individual, and he would write, as I've said in previous videos, he would write his friends, like, I don't want to say religiously, but I guess religiously. It was a different time, and he would write them. And during this Yuletide season, during this Christmas season, he would write extensive letters and then leave Christmas poems to his closest friends. And so I'm going to read one of those poems today. It goes by various titles online. One is The Festival, and the other is Yule Horror. So whichever title you're familiar with, that's the one we're going to read. And then from that, we're going to discuss The Festival. And then we'll end this video on The Strange High House in the Mist, which is one of my top favorite dream cycle stories. My favorite being The Dreams in the Witch House. But, we got New Year's coming, so maybe that will be that video. And then I'll end it with another final Christmas carol for all of you. So, in saying that, I hope your loved ones and St. Nicholas himself has come down your chimney and given you a lot of wonderful presents. I know Mr. Presley, from seeing that video that Jerry uploaded, wished that you would get some Beatles records and some gospel records from his time period. I would highly recommend all those records, but I hope you got the records that you yourself enjoy from the musics that fit more so your taste. Seeing how this video is going on about the 9-minute mark now, I would like to start segueing this into the horror channel that we all know and love, and start reading The Festival, or otherwise known as the Yule Horror, by H.P. Lovecraft. There is a snow on the ground, and the valleys are cold, and at midnight profound, Blackie squats over the world. But a light in the hilltops have seen hints of feastings unhallowed and old. There is death in the clouds. There is fear in the night, for the dead in their shrouds held the sun's turning flight, and chant wild in the woods as they dance round a Yule altar, fungus and white. To no gale of earth's kind sway the forest of oak, where the sick boughs entwined by mad mistletoes choke. For the powers are the powers of the dark from the graves of the lost druid folk, and mayest thou to such deeds be on an abbot and priest, singing cannibal greeds at each devil-wrought feast, and to all the incredulous world showing dimly the sign of the beast. So yeah, obviously that is a very metal Christmas poem. And I thought it would be fitting to segue into our more traditional Christmas carols. So, without further ado, I hope you get your winter jack or whatever illustrious drink you may partake of. Of course, Coca-Cola is obvious, a clear choice, and of course Pepsi if you follow alongside with the king. Now, we're going to be reading the festival, and it is from the Dagon book. Now, I know followers of the channel will be excited to wonder what the original viewer opinions were on such an illustrious tome. But unfortunately, as you'll see, and I'll even show you, because, I'm all about honesty here, they did not give the festival, or, full disclosure, the Strange High House and the Mist any rating. You can see it. In fact, it looks like the last rating they gave was The Evil Clergyman, and they gave that a B+. And it looks like they read Lovecraft's dissertation on supernatural horror in literature, but unfortunately they didn't grade it, which is comes as a unique surprise for me. Hang on, I gotta put the full back on this. It just doesn't feel right for me. So that's kind of disappointing, because one of the fun things about making these videos, in my opinion, have been kind of like, what has our old school friend who used to own this ancient tome thought about it? Like what did they think about it? And that's right, I'm rocking the UFO Museum in Roswell. Y'all should all go there. It's a wonderful place. So without further ado, I guess we'll kind of go into the nitty-gritty on the festival, all the backstory and all that jazz. So there's not too much to say, but the festival is obviously a short story written by H.P. Lovecraft, written in October 1923 and published in January 1925 issue of Weird Tales. So, without spoiling the story, which we definitely will not, but this story was inspired by Lovecraft's first trip to Marblehead, Massachusetts, in December in 1922. Lovecraft later called the visit the most powerful single emotional climax experience during his nearly 40 years of existence. And I'm just going to read you a little letter that he wrote to one of his friends here. And it says, "In a flash, all the past of New England, all the past of Old England, all the past of Anglo-Saxondom and the Western world swept over me and identified me with the stupendous totality of all things in such a way as it never did before and never did again. That was the high tide of my life." So this story takes place in the fictional town of Kingsport. So we are in Kingsport once more. Now, the church in this story is based off of St. Michael's Episcopal Church on Frog Lane, which was built in 1714, and it is the oldest Anglican church in New England that is still standing at its original site. The church is on a modest hill for most of the 18th century. It had steeple. Its crypts, where parishioners were interred, remains. Since Lovecraft visited the church as evidenced by signature in the guest register. He may have spoken with the rector and learned such details about the church. Lovecraft was also influenced by two books he had recently read, in which he said in letters, "In imitating an alien race, I had in mind the survival of some clan of pre-Aryan sorcerers who preserved primitive rites like those in the witch cult I had just been reading Margaret Murray's The Witch Cult in Western Europe." Hence, he describes the narrator's folks as an old people and strange because they had come as dark, furtive folk from opiate southern gardens of orchids and spoken another tongue before they learnt the tongue of the blue-eyed fishers. The idea of pre-Aryan survivals was the basis of the novel The Black Sea, a story in Arthur Machen's 1895 novel The Three Impostors. This story, too, had impressed Lovecraft when he read it not long before writing The Festival, and influenced the development of some of his later stories, including The Call of Cthulhu, which was written in 1926, The Dunwich Horror, written in 1928, and The Whispers and Darkness, written in 1930. So those are some, that's a badass triple feature if you ask me. But anyways, we're going to delve into this story, and, most of it is, or I would rather say, a lot of it is heavily influenced by just badassery, just awesomeness. So we're not going to waste any more time. So I hope you get yourself all snugged and relaxed, and we're going to read The Festival. Cheers. Merry Christmas. The Festival by H.P. Lovecraft. Efficit demonis ut quae nos sunt sic tamen quasi sint conspicia homines exhibit. Lactanius. Yeah, I probably butchered all that because I don't even know how to speak that language. But anyways, we're going to move on. I was far from home, and the spell of the eastern sea was upon me. In the twilight I heard it pounding on the rocks, and I knew it lay just over the hill where the twisting willows writhed against the clearing sky and the first stars of evening. And because my fathers had called me to the old town beyond, I pushed on through the shallow, new-fallen snow along the road that soared lonely up to where Aldebaran twinkled among the trees, on toward the very ancient town I had never seen but often dreamed of. It was the Yuletide that men call Christmas, though they know in their hearts it is older than Bethlehem and Babylon, older than Memphis and mankind. It was the Yuletide, and I had come at last to the ancient sea town where my people had dwelt and kept festival in the elder time when festivals were forbidden. Where also they had commanded their sons to keep festival once every century, that the memory of primeval secrets might not be forgotten. Mine were an old people, and were old even when this land was settled 300 years before, and they were strange because they had come as dark furtive folk from opiate southern gardens and orchids, and spoken another tongue before they learnt the tongue of the blue-eyed fishers. And now they were scattered and shared only the ritual of mysteries that none living could understand. I was the only one who came back that night to the old fishing town as legend bade, for only the poor had the lonely, and the lonely remember. Then beyond the hill's crest I saw Kingsport, outspread frostily in the gloaming, snowy Kingsport with its ancient vanes and steeples, rigid poles and chimney pots, wharves and small bridges, willow trees and graveyards, endless labyrinths of steep, narrow, crooked streets, and dizzy church-crowned central peak that time durst not touch, ceaseless mazes of colonial houses piled and scattered at all the angles and levels like a child's disordered blocks, antiquity hovering on gray wings over winter-winded gables and gambrel roofs, fan lights and small paned windows one by one gleaming out in the cold dust to join Orion and the archaic stars, and against the rotting wharves the sea pounded, the secretive, immoral sea out of which the people had come in the elder times. Besides the road at its crest a still higher summit rose, bleak and windswept, and I saw that it was a barren ground where black gravestones dug ghoulishly through snow like the decayed fingertips of a gigantic corpse. The printless road was very lonely, and sometimes I thought I heard a distant horrible creaking as of a gibbet in the wind. They had hanged 4 kinsmen of mine for witchcraft in 1692, but I did not know just where. As the road wound down the seaweed slope, I listened for the merry sounds of a village at evening, but did not hear them. Then I thought of the Christmas season, and felt that these old Puritan folk might well have Christmas customs strange to me, and full of silent heart-side prayer. So after that I did not listen for merriment or look for wayfarers, kept on down, past the hush-lighted farmhouses and shadowy stone walls, to where the signs of ancient shops and sea taverns creaked in the salt breeze, and the grotesque knockers of pillared doorways glistened along deserted unpaved lanes in the light of little curtained windows. I had seen maps of the town and knew where to find the home of my people. It was told that I should be known and welcome, for village legends live long, so I hastened through Black Street to Circle Court, and across the fresh snow on the one full flagstone pavement in the town to where Green Lane leads off behind the market house. The old map still held good, and I had no trouble, though at Arkham they must have lived, or lied, rather, when they said the trolleys ran to this place, since I saw not a wire overhead. Snow would have hid the rails in any case. I was glad I had chosen the walk, for the white village had seemed very beautiful from the hill, and now I was eager to knock at the door of my people, the 7th house on the left in Green Lane, with an ancient peaked roof and jutting second story, all built before 1650. There were lights inside the house when I came upon it, and I saw from the diamond window panes that it must have been kept very close to its antique stake. The upper part overhung the narrow grass-grown street and nearly met the overhanging part of the house opposite, so that I was almost in a tunnel, with the low stone doorstep wholly free from snow. There was no sidewalk, but many houses had high doors reached by double flights of steps and iron railings. It was an odd scene, and because I was strange to New England, I had never known its like before. Though it pleased me, I would have relished it better if there had been footprints in the snow, and before in the streets, and a few windows without drawn curtains. When I sounded the archaic iron knocker, I was half afraid. Some fear had gathered in me, perhaps because of the strangeness of my heritage, and the bleakness of the evening, and the queerness of the silence in that aged town of curious customs. And when my knock was answered, I was fully afraid, because I had not in any footsteps before the door creaked open. Because I had not heard any footsteps before the door creaked open. I apologize. I beg your pardon. But I was not afraid long, for the gown-slippered old man in the doorway had a bland face that reassured me, and though he made signs that he was dumb, he wrote a quaint and ancient welcome with the stylus and wax tablet he carried. He beckoned me into a low, candlelit room with massive exposed rafters and dark, stiff, sparse furniture of the 17th century. The past was vivid there, for not an attribute was missing. There was a cavernous fireplace and a spinning wheel at which a bent old woman in loose wrapper and deep-poked bonnet sat back toward me, silently spinning despite the festive season. An indefinite dampness seemed upon the place, and I marveled that no fire should be blazing. The high packed settle faced the row of curtained windows at the left and seemed to be occupied, though I was not sure. I did not like everything about what I saw, and felt again the fear I had had. This fear grew stronger from that had before lessened it, for the more I looked at the old man's bland face, the more its very blandness terrified me. The eyes never moved, and the skin was too much like wax. Finally, I was sure it was not a face at all, but a fiendishly cunning mask, but the flabby hands, curious gloved, wrote gingerly on the tablet and told me I must wait a while before I could be led to the place of the festival. Pointing to a chair, table, and pile of books, the old man now left the room, and when I sat down to read, I saw that the books were hoary and moldy, and that they included old Moister's wild marvels of science and terrible Sadducismus Triumphasis of Joseph Calvinville, published in 1681. The shocking Daemon Altaria of Regmus, printed in 1595 at Lyons, and worst of all, the unmentionable Necronomicon of the mad Arab Abdul al-Hazred, an Aldous Warmest forbidden Latin translation, a book which I had never seen, but of which I heard monstrous things whispered. No one spoke to me, but I would hear the creaking of signs in the wind outside, and the whir of the wheel as the bonneted old woman continued her silent spinning. I thought the room and the books and the people very morbid and disquieting, but because an old tradition of my father's had summoned me to strange feastings, I resolved to expect queer things. So I tried to read, and soon became tremblingly absorbed by something I found in that accursed Necronomicon. A thought and legend too hideous for sanity or consciousness. But I disliked it when I fancied I heard the closing of one of the windows that the settle faced as if it had been stealthily opened. It had seemed to follow a whirring that was not of the old woman's spinning wheel. This was not much, though, for the old woman was spinning very hard, and the age clock had been striking. After that, I lost the feeling that there were persons on the settle, and was reading intently and shuddering when the old man came back booted and dressed in a loose antique costume, and sat down on that very bench so that I could not see him. It was certainly nervous waiting, and the blasphemous book in my hands made it doubly so. When 11 struck, however, the old man stood up, glided to a massive carved chest in a corner, and got 2 hooked cloaks, one of which he donned, and the other of which he draped around the old woman, who was ceasing her monotonous spinning. Then they both started for the outer door, the woman lamely creeping, and the old man, after picking up the very book I had been reading, beckoning me as he drew his hood over that unmoving face or mask. We went out into the moonless and tortuous network of the incredibly ancient town, went out as the lights in the curtained windows disappeared one by one, and the dog star leered at the throng of cloud-cloaked figures that poured silently from every doorway and formed monstrous processions up this street and that, past the creaking signs and antediluvian gabbles and thatched roofs and diamond-paned windows, threading precipitous lanes where decaying houses overlapped and crumbled together, gliding across open courts and churchyards where the bobbing lanthorns made eldritch drunken constellations. Amid these hushed throngs I followed my voiceless guides, jostled by elbows that seemed perpetually soft, impressed by chests and stomachs that seemed abnormally pulpy, but seeing never a face and hearing never a word, up, the eerily columns slithered, and I saw that all the travelers were converging as they flowed near a sort of focus on crazy alleys at the top of the high hill in the center of the town, where perched a great white church. I had seen it from Rhodes Crest, once I looked at Kingsport in the new dusk, and it had made me shiver because Aldebaran had seemed to balance itself a moment on the ghostly spire. There was an open space around the church, partially a churchyard with spectral shafts, and partially a half-paved square, swept nearly bare of snow by the wind, and lined with unwholesomely archaic houses, having peaked roofs and overhanging gables. Death fires danced over the shadows. Death fires danced over the tombs, revealing gruesome vistas, though queerly failing to cast any shadows. But the churchyard, where there were no houses, I could see over the hill's summit and watch the glimmer of stars on the harbor, though the town was invisible in the dark. Only once in a while a lanthorn bobbed horribly through serpentine alleys on its way to overtake the throng that was now slipping speechlessly into the church. I waited till the crowd had oozed into the black doorway, until all the stragglers had followed. The old man was pulling at my sleeve, but I was determined to be the last. Crossing the threshold into the swarming temple of unknown darkness, I turned once to look at the outside world as the churchyard phosphorescence cast a sickly glow on the hilltop pavement. And as I did so I shuddered, for though the wind had not left much snow, a few patches did remain on the path near the door, and in that fleeting backward look it seemed to me, into my troubled eyes, that they bore no mark of passing feet, not even mine. The church was scarce lighted by all the lanthorns that had entered it, for most of the throng had already vanished. They had streamed up the aisle between the high pews to the trap door of the vaults which yawned loathsomely open just before the pulpit, and were now squirming noiselessly in. I followed dumbly down the foot-worn steps and into the dark, suffocating crypt. The tale of that sinuous line of night marches seemed very horrible, and as I saw them wriggling into a venerable tomb, they seemed more horrible still. Then I noticed that the tomb's floor had an aperture down which the throng was sliding, and in a moment we were all descending an ominous staircase of rough-hewn stone. A narrow spiral staircase, damp and peculiarly odorous, that wound endlessly down into the bowels of the hill past monotonous walls of dripping stone blocks and crumbling mortar. It was a silent, shocking descent, and I observed after horrible intervals that the walls and steps were changing in nature, as if chiseled out of the solid rock. What mainly troubled me was that the mirrored footfalls made no sound and set up no echoes. After more aeons of descent, I saw some side passage or burrows leading from unknown recesses of blackness to the shaft of night mystery. Soon they became excessively numerous, like impious catacombs of nameless menace, and their pungent odor of decay grew quite unbearable. I knew we must have passed down through the mountain and beneath the earth of Kingsport itself, and I shivered that a town should be so aged and maggoty with subterraneous evil. Then I saw the lurid shimmering of pale light, and heard the insidious lapping of sunless waters. Again I shivered, for I did not like the things that the night had brought, and wished bitterly that no forefather had summoned me to this primal rite. As the steps of the passage grew broader, I heard another sound, the thin whining mockery of a feeble flute, and suddenly there spread out before me the boundless vistas of an inner world, a vast funguous shore lit by a belching column of sick greenish flame, and washed by a wide oily river, and flowed from abysses frightful and unsuspected to join the blackest gulfs of immemorial ocean. Fainting and gasping, I looked at that unhallowed Erebus of tightened toadstools, leprous fire, and slimy water, and saw the cloaked throngs forming a semicircle around the blazing pillar. It was the Yule rite, older than man and fated to survive him, the primal rite of the solstice, and of spring's promise beyond the snows, the rite of fire and evergreen light and music. And in the Stygian grotto I saw them do the rite, and adore the sick pillar of flame, and throw into water handfuls gouged out of the vicious vegetations which glittered green in the caloric glare. I saw this, and I saw something amorphously squatted far away from the light, piping noisomely on a flute. And then as the thing piped, I thought I heard noxious muffled flutterings in the foetid darkness where I could not see. But what frightened me most was that flaming column, spouting volcanically from depths profound and inconceivable, casting no shadows as healthy flame should, and coating the nitrous stone with a nasty venomous verdigris. For in all that seething combustion no warmth lay, but only the calmness of death and corruption. The man who had brought me now squirmed to a point directly beside the hideous flame, and made stiff ceremonial motions to the semicircle he faced. At certain stages of the ritual they did groveling obedience, especially when he held above his head that abhorrent Necronomicon he had taken with him, and I shared all the obedience because I had been summoned to this festival by the writings of my forefathers. Then the old man made a signal to the half-seen flute player, and the darkness, which player thereupon changed its feeble drone to a scarce louder drone in another key, precipitating as it did so a horror unthinkable and unexpected. As this horror I sank neatly to the lynchen earth, transfixed with the dread not of this or any world, but only of the mad spaces between the stars. Out of the unimaginable blackness, beyond the gangrenous glare of that cold flame, out of the Tartarian leagues through which the oily river rolled uncanny, unheard and unsuspected, there flopped rhythmically a horde of tame, trained, hybrid-winged things that no sound eye could ever wholly grasp, or sound brain ever wholly remember. They were not altogether crows, nor moles, nor buzzards, nor ants, nor vampire bats, nor decomposed human beings, but something I cannot and must not recall. They flopped limply along, half with their webbed feet of celebrants. The cowled figures seized and mounted them, and rode off one by one along the reaches of that unlighted river, into pits and galleries of panic, where poison springs feed frightful and undiscoverable cataracts. The old spinning woman had gone with the throng, and the old man remained only because I had to refuse when he motioned me to seize an animal and ride like the rest. I saw when I staggered to my feet that the amorphous flute player had rolled out of sight, but that two of the beasts were patiently standing by. As I hummed back, the old man produced his stylus and tablet and wrote that he was the true deputy of my fathers who had founded the Yule worship in these ancient places, that it had been decreed I should come back, and that the most secret mysteries were yet to be performed. He wrote in a very ancient hand, and when I still hesitated, he pulled from his loose robe a seal ring and a watch, both with my family arms, to prove that he was what he said. But it was a hideous proof, because I knew from old papers that the watch had been buried with my great-great-great-great-grandfather in 1698. Presently, the old man drew back his hood and pointed to the family resemblance in his face, but I only shuddered, because I was sure that the face was merely a devilish waxen mask. The flopping animals were now scratching restlessly at the lichens, and I saw that the old man was nearly as restless himself. When one of the things began to waddle and edge away, he turned quickly to stop it, so that the suddenness of his motion dislodged the waxen mask from what should have been his head. And then, because that nightmare positions barred me from the stone staircase down which we had come, I flung myself into the oily underground river and bubbled somewhere to the caves of the sea. Flung myself into that putrescent juice of earth's inner horrors before the madness of my screams could bring down upon me all the charnel legions those pestigulfs might conceal. At the hospital, they told me I had been found half frozen in Kingsport Harbor at dawn, clinging to the drifting spar that accident sent to save me. They told me I had taken the wrong fork of the hill road the night before and fallen over the cliffs at Orange Point, a thing they deduced from prints found in the snow. There was nothing I could say, because everything was wrong. Everything was wrong with the broad windows showing a sea of roofs in which only about 1 in 5 was ancient, and the sound of trolleys and motors in the streets below. They insisted that this was Kingsport, and I could not deny it. When I went delirious at hearing that the hospital stood near the old churchyard on Centre Hill, they sent me to St. Mary's Hospital in Arkham, where I could have better care. I liked it there, for the doctors were broad-minded, and even lent me their influence in obtaining the carefully sheltered copy of Alhazred's objectionable Necronomicon from the library of Miskatonic University. They said something about a psychosis, and agreed I had better get any harassing obsessions off my mind. So I read the hideous chapter, and shuddered doubly, because it was indeed not new to me. I had seen it before, let footprints tell what they might, and where it was, I had seen it where best forgotten. There was no one, in waking hours, who could remind me of it, but my dreams are filled with terror because of phrases I dare not quote. I dare quote only one paragraph, put into English as I can make from the awkward low Latin. The nethermost caverns, wrote the mad Arab, are not for the fathoming of eyes that see, for their marvels are strange and terrific. Curse the ground where dead thoughts live new and oddly bodied, and evil the mind that is held by no head. Wisely did Ibn Jacobo say that happy is the tomb where no wizard hath lain, and happy the town at night whose wizards are all ashes. For it is of old rumour that the soul of the devil bought haste not from his charnel clay, but fats and instructs the very worm that gnaws, till out of corruption horrid life springs, and the dull scavengers of earth wax crafty to vex it, and swell monstrous to plague it. Great holes secretly are digged where earth's pores ought to suffice, and things have learned to walk that ought to crawl. Yeah, the festival is pretty awesome. It's a Christmas classic or Yuletide classic. It's pretty awesome. The first time I ever read this story, I believe I was either on summer break or on winter break, and yeah, it was a kind of rainy day, and I was feeling kind of off, and I had a collection of Lovecraft stories, and I just picked that one. I was like, whatever, and it wasn't quite Christmas time, but it got me in. It got me in the mood for the season, and it creeped me out as a kid, and of course it referenced the Necronomicon, and I think I had just read The Hound before that. And, of course, I love all the Evil Dead movies, the Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, and all of that. And I know we've shown a majority of those films on Chamber of Horrors and, Spooky Fam Nights on Fridays and Saturday movie viewings. So, this story stuck with me, and I thought, wow, what an awesome, because you don't get too much Christmas horror. I mean, now with this year in 2024 with Terrifier 3, you got an awesome Christmas horror film. But that pays homage to, like, Black Christmas and, The Shining, which is also, it's kind of snowy in wintertime. So, kind of Christmassy. So, there's very few Christmas horror films out there. So I adored this story because I thought, wow, that's a perfect story to read on Christmas Day, Christmas Eve, what have you. But anyways, I know we're reaching about almost, we're about 43 minutes in, and I wanted to spend a little bit more time with you because it is Christmas, and just in case you're driving out of town and you need something to listen to, or worse, you don't really have anybody to spend it with, you can spend it here at the Grand Library here at the Lagoon. Now, the next story I want to read is The Strange High House in the Mist, and that is honestly one of my favorite kind of like dream cycle stories. The only one that dethrones it is of course the dreams in the witch house. Now, that being said, The Strange High House in the Mist is a short story written by H.P. Lovecraft. It was written on November 9th, 1926, and it was first published in the October 1931 issue of Weird Tales. It concerns a character traveling to the titular house, which is perched on the top of a cliff, which seems inaccessible both by land and sea, yet is apparently inhabited. So, this is a really cool story, and I figured it'd be kind of like a really badass way to kind of end this video. And don't worry, we're still going to end it on the Christmas spirit with one more Christmas carol. But as far as the inspiration of the story goes, A H.P. Lovecraft encyclopedia suggests that the story may have been inspired by Lord Dunsany's Chronicle of Rodriguez, in which strange sights can be seen from a wizard's house on a crag. One model for the setting was Mother Anne, a headland near, I don't know, Gloucester, Massachusetts. I apologize if I have not pronounced that correctly. Now, this is a good way to segue ourselves back into Lovecraft, because the next couple of videos are going to be finishing up the dream cycle and moving into the final conclusions of Randolph Carter. So the connections of this story is obviously Kingsport, because we're still in Kingsport. It's still Christmas. Come on, we're going to be spending a little more time here. It's mentioned in several of Lovecraft's stories. It first appeared in The Terrible Old Man, which we have already read. And the title character of that story makes an appearance in this story as well. And the old man mentions that the house has been on the cliff even when his grandfather was a boy, which the main character comments must be immeasurable ages ago. The story also makes references to the Celtic god Nodens, who also appears in the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadaf and is himself, this entity was later incorporated into the Cthulhu mythos itself by August Derleth and became a crucial figure in Yog Sothory, and he is known as a leader of the Elder Gods. In the same passage in The Strange High House, Lovecraft also mentions the arrival of the god Neptune, but that Roman deity has not similarly been adapted by Lovecraftian writers, unfortunately. Oh, but maybe I haven't some of my reading. The man in the house mentions Atlantis, which was also mentioned in the temple. Hey, one of the first videos we did, so we're coming full circle now on this Christmas day as the possible identity of the mysterious underwater city. He also mentions Hathach Claw and Althar from the Other Gods and the Cats of Althar. So, as you can see, we are very much heading into full circle territory here within the mythos. A little cool thing just to talk about before we get into it is that this story was rejected by Weird Tales when it was submitted in July of 1927. And in 1929, Lovecraft agreed to let W. Paul Cook publish it in the second issue of The Recluse. But when it became clear that this issue would never appear, he resubmitted it to Weird Tales, which accepted it, paying him $55. Robert A. Lowndes called The Strange High House in the Mist one of Lovecraft's best short stories. And I have to say, I very much agree with him. This is like one of my favorite short stories that Lovecraft has ever written. And we're about to hit the 48-minute mark, and I say we go ahead and get in. So, cheers, Merry Christmas. Get yourself all comfy. This isn't necessarily a Christmas tale like the last one, but it fits, and you'll see why. So, The Strange High House in the Mist. In the morning, mist comes up from the sea by the cliffs beyond Kingsport. White and feathery it comes from the deep to its brother the clouds, full of dreams of dank pastures and caves of Leviathan. And later, in still summer rains on the steep roofs of poets, the clouds scatter bits of those dreams that men shall not live without rumor of old strange secrets, and wonders that planets tell planets alone in the night. When tales fly thick in the grottos of Tritons, and conchs and seaweed cities below wild tunes learned from the elder ones, then great eager mists flock to heaven laden with lore, and ocean-ward eyes of the rocks see only a mystic whiteness, as if the cliff's rim were the rim of all earth, and the solemn bells of boyals tolled free in the aether of fairy. Now north of archaic Kingsport, the crags climb loftily and curious, terrace on terrace, till the northernmost hangs in the sky like a gray, frozen wind cloud. Along it, alone it is, a bleak point jutting its limitless space, for there the coast turns sharp where the great Miskatonic pours out of the plains past Arkham, bringing woodland legends and little quaint memories of New England hills. The sea folk in Kingsport look up at the cliff as other sea folk look up at the pole star, and time in the nights watches by the way it hides or shows the great bear, Cassiopeia, and the dragon. Among them it is one with the firmament, and truly it is hidden from them when the mist hides the stars of the sun. Some of the cliffs they love as that whose grotesque profile they call Father Neptune, or that whose pillared steeps they term the causeway. But this one they fear because it is so near the sky. The Portuguese sailors coming in from the voyage cross themselves when they first see it, and the old Yankees believe it would be much graver matter than death to climb it, if indeed that were possible. Nevertheless, there is an ancient house on that cliff, and at evening men see lights in the small pan windows. The ancient house has always been there, and people say one dwells within, whom talks with the morning mists that come up from the deep, and perhaps sees singular things oceanward at those times when the cliff's rims become the rim of all earth, and solemn bios toll free in the where either a fairy. This they tell from hearsay, from that forbidding crag is always unvisited, and natives dislike to train telescopes on it. Summer boarders have indeed scanned it with jaunty binoculars, but have never seen more than the gray primeval roof peaked and shingled, whose eaves come nearly to the gray foundations in the dim yellow light of the little windows peeping out from under those eaves in the dusk. These summer people do not believe that the same one has lived in the ancient house for hundreds of years, but cannot prove their heresy to any real Kingsporter. Even the terrible old man who talks to Latin pendulums and bottles, buys groceries with sintered Spanish gold, and keeps stone idols in the yard of his Antavulling College in Water Street, can only say these things were the same when his grandfather was a boy. And that must have been inconceivable ages ago, when Belcher or Shirley or Powell or Bernard was governor of His Majesty's province of the Massachusetts Bay. Then one summer there came a philosopher into Kingsport. His name was Thomas Only, and he taught ponderous things in a college by Nargas Bay. With stout wife and romping children he came, and his eyes were wearied with seeing the same things for many years, and thinking the same well-disciplined thoughts. He looked at the mist from the diadem of Father Neptune, and tried to walk into their white world of mystery along the tightened steps of the causeway. Morning after morning he would lie on the cliffs and look over the world's rim at the cryptical aether beyond, listening to spectral bells and the wild cries of what might have been gulls. Then, when the mist would lift and the sea stand out prosy, the smoke of steamers, he would sigh and descend to the town, where he loved to tread the narrow olden lanes up and down hill, and study the crazy, tottering gables and old pillar doorways which had sheltered so many generations of sturdy sea folk. And he even talked with the terrible old man, who was not fond of strangers, and was invited into his fearsomely archaic cottage, where low ceilings and wormy panelled hear the echoes of disquieting soliloquies and the dark small hours. Of course it was inevitable that only should mark the grey unvisited cottage in the sky on that sinister northward crag which is one the mist and of the firmament. Always over Kingsport it hung, and always its mystery sounded in whispers through Kingsport's crooked alleys. The terrible old man wheezed a tale that his father had told him, of lighting that shot one night up from the peak cottage to the clouds of higher heaven, and Granny Orne, whose tiny gramble roof abode in Ship Street is all covered with moss and ivy, croaked over something her grandfather had heard at second hand about shapes that flapped out of the eastern mist straight into the narrow single door of that unreachable place. For the door is set close to the edge of the crag towards the ocean, and glimpsed only from ships at sea. At length, being avid for new strange things, and held back by neither the Kingsporter's fear nor the summer boarder's usual indolence, only made a very terrible resolve. Despite a conservative training, or because of it, for humdrum lives bred wistful longings of the unknown, he swore a great oath to scale that avoided northern cliff and visit that abnormally antique gray cottage in the sky. Very plausibly, his saner self argued that the place must be tenanted by people who reached it from inland along the easier ridge beside the Miskatonic estuary. Probably they traded in Arkham, knowing how little Kingsport liked their habitation, or perhaps being unable to climb down the cliff on the Kingsport side, only walked out along the lesser cliffs to where the great crag leaped instantly up the consort with celestial things, and became very sure that no human feet could mount it or descend it on that beetling southern slope. East and north it rose thousands of feet perpendicular from the water, so only the western side inland and towards Arkham remained. One early morning in August only set out to find a path to the inaccessible pinnacle. He worked northwest along pleasant back roads past Hopper's Pond and the old bricks powder house, to where the pastures slope up to the ridge above the Miskatonic and give a lovely vista of the Arkham White's Gregorian steeples across leagues of river and meadow. Here he found a shady road to Arkham, but no trail at all in the seaward direction he wished. Woods and fields crowded up to the high bank of the river's mouth and bore not a sign of man's presence, not even a stone wall or straying cow, but only the tall grass and giant trees and tangles of briars that first Indian might have seen. As he climbed slowly east, higher and higher above the estuary of his left and nearer the sea, he found the way growing in difficulty till he wondered how ever the dwellers in that disliked place managed to reach the world outside, and whether they came often to market in Arkham. Then the trees thinned, and far below him on his right he saw the hills and antique roofs and spires of Kingsport. Even Central Hill was a dwarf from this height, and he could just make out the ancient graveyard by the Congregational Hospital, beneath which rumors said some terrible caves or burrows lurked. Ahead lay sparse grass and scrub blueberry bushes, and beyond them the naked rock of the crag and the thin peak of the dreaded great cottage. Now the ridge narrowed, and Onley grew dizzy at his loneliness in the sky. South of him the frightful precipice above Kingsport, north of him the vertical drop of nearly a mile to the river's mouth. Suddenly a great chasm opened before him, 10 feet deep, so he had to let himself down by his hands and drop to a slanting floor, and then crawl perilously up a natural defile and the opposite wall. So this was the way the folk of the uncanny house journeyed betwixt earth and sky. When he climbed out of the chasm, a morning mist was gathering, but he clearly saw the lofty and unhallowed cottage ahead. Walls as gray as the rock, and high peaks standing bold against the milky white of the seaward vapors. And he perceived that there was no door on this landward inn, but only a couple of small lattice windows with dingy bull-eye panes leaded to 17th century fashion. All around him was cloud and chaos, and he could see nothing below the whiteness of illuminable space. He was alone in the sky with this queer and very disturbing house, and when he sighted around the front and saw that the wall stood flush with the cliff's edge, so that the single narrow door was not to be reached save from the empty aether, he felt a distinct terror that altitude could not wholly explain, and it was very odd that shingles so worm-eaten could survive, or bricks so crumbled still from a standing chimney. As the mist thickened, Only crept around to the windows on the north and west and south sides, trying them, but found them all locked. He was vaguely glad they were locked, because the more he saw of that house, the less he wished to get in. Then a sound halted him. He heard a lock rattle and a bolt shoot, and a long creaking follow, as if a heavy door were slowly and cautiously opened. This was on the oceanward side that he could not see, where the narrow portal opened on blank space thousands of feet in the misty sky above the waves. Then there was heavy, deliberate tramping in the cottage, and Only heard the windows opened, first on the north side opposite him, and then on the west side around the corner. Next would come the sound windows, under the great low eaves of the side where he stood, and it must, be said, that he was more than uncomfortable as he thought of the detestable house on one side and the vacancy of upper air on the other. When a fumbling came in the nearer casements, he crept around to the west again, flattening himself against the wall beside the now open windows. It was plain that the owner had come home, but he had not come from the land, nor from any balloon or airship that could be imagined. Steps sounded again, and only edged around to the north before he could find a haven. A voice called softly, and he knew he must confront his host. Stuck out of the west window was a great black-bearded face whose eyes were phosphorescent with the imprint of unheard-of sights. But the voice was gentle and of a quaint olden kind, so that only did not shudder when a brown hand reached out to help him over the sill and into the low room of black oat waistcoats and carved Tudor fashionings. The man was clad in very ancient garments and had about him an unplaceable nimbus of sea lore and dreams of tall gallants. Only does not recall many of the wonders he told or even who he was, but says that he was strange and kindly and filled with the magic of unfathomed voids of time and space. The small room seemed green with a dim aqueous light, and only saw that the far windows to the east were not open, but shut against the misty aether with dual thick panes like the bottoms of old bottles. That bearded host seemed young, yet looked out of eye steeped in the elder mysteries, and from the tales of marvelous ancient things he related, it must be guessed that the village folk were right in saying he had communed with the mist of the sea and the clouds of the sky ever since there was any village in the watch, his taciturn dwelling from the plain below. And the day wore on, and still only listened to rumors of old times in far places, and heard how the kings of Atlantis fought with the slippery blasphemies that wriggled out of its rifts in ocean's floor, and how the pillared and weedy temple of Poseidon is still glimpsed at midnight by lost ships, who know by its sight that they are lost. Years of the Titans were recalled, but the host grew timid, where he spoke of the dim first age of chaos before the gods or even the elder ones were born, and when the other gods came to dance on the peak of Hafakla and the stony desert near Althar beyond the river sky. It was at this point that there came a knocking on the door, that an ancient door of nail-studded oak beyond which lay only the abyss of white cloud. Only started in fright, but the bearded man motioned him to be still, and tiptoed to the door to look out through its very small peephole. What he saw he did not like, so pressed his fingers to his lips and tiptoed around to shut and lock all the windows before returning to the ancient settle beside his guest. Then only saw lingering against the translucent squares of each the little dim windows in succession a queer black outline as the caller moved inquisitively about before leaving. And he was glad his host had not answered the knocking, for there are strange objects in the great abyss, and the seeker of dreams must take care not to stir up or meet the wrong ones. Then the shadows began to gather, first little furtive ones under the table, and then bolder ones in the dark paneled corners. And the bearded man made enigmatical gestures of prayer, and lit tall candles in curiously wrought brass candlesticks. Frequently he would glance at the sword by a singular rapping which must have followed some very ancient and secret code. This time he did not even glance through the peephole, but swung the great oak door and shot the bolt, unlatching the heavy door and flinging it wide to the stars and the mist. And then, to the sound of obscured harmonies, there floated into that room, from the deep, all the dreams and memories of earth-sunken mighty ones, and golden flames played about weedy locks, so that only was dazed as he did them homage. Trident-bearing Neptune was there, and sportive Tritons and fantastic Nereids, and upon dolphins' backs was balanced a vast correlative swell wherein rode the grey and awful form of primal Nodens, lord of the great abyss, and the conches of the Tritons gave wide blast, and the Nereids made strange sounds by striking on the grotesque resonant shells of unknown lurkers and black sea caves. Then hoary Nodens reached forth a wizened hand and helped only in his host into the vast shell, where the conches and the gongs set up a wild and awesome clamor. And out into the limitless aether reeled the fabulous train, the noise of whose shouting was lost in the echoes of thunder. All night in Kingsport they watched that lofty cliff when the storms and the mist gave them glimpses of light. And when towered the small hours, the little dim windows went dark, they whispered of dread and disaster. And only's children and stout wife prayed to the bland, proper God of Baptist, and hoped that the traveler would borrow an umbrella and rubbers unless the rain stopped by morning. Then dawn swam, dripping and mist withered, reefed out of the sea, and the boils trolled solemn in vortices of white aether. And at noon elfin horns rang over the ocean of only. Dry and light-footed climbed down from the cliffs to antique Kingsport with the look of far places in his eyes. He could not recall what he had dreamed in that sky-perched hut of that still nameless hermit, or say how he had crept down that crag untraversed by other feet, nor could he talk of these matters at all save with the terrible old man, who afterward mumbled queer things in his long white beard, vowing that the man who had came down from the crag was not wholly the man who went up, and that somewhere under that gray peaked roof or amidst inconceivable reaches of that sinister white mist there lingered still the lost spirits of him who was Thomas only. And ever since that hour, through dull dragging years of grayness and weariness, the philosopher has labored and eaten and slept and done uncomplaining and subtle deeds of a citizen. Not any more does he long for the magic of farther hills, or sigh for secrets that peer like green reefs from a bottomless sea. The sameness of his days no longer gives him sorrow, and well-disciplined thoughts have grown enough for his imagination. His good wife waxes stouter, and his children older and posier and more useful, and he never fails to smile correctly with pride where the occasion calls for it. In his glance there is not any restless light, and if he ever listens for solemn bells or for elfin horns, it is only at night when old dreams are wandering. He has never seen Kingsport again, for his family disliked the funny old houses and complained that the drains were impossibly bad. They have a trim bungalow now at Bristol Highlands, where no tall crags tower and the neighbors are urban and modern. But in Kingsport strange tales are abroad, and even the terrible old man admits a thing untold by his grandfather. For now, when the wind sweeps boisterous out of the north past the high ancient houses that is one with the firmament, there is broken at last that ominous brooding silence ever before the bane of Kingsport maritime cotters, and old folk tell of pleasing voices heard singing there, and of laughter that swells with joys beyond earth joys, and say that at evening the little low windows are brighter than formerly. They say, too, that the fierce of frozen worlds where the crag and the cottage hung black and fantastic against wild crustaceans, and the mists of the dawn are thicker, and sailors are not quite so sure that all the muffled seaward ringing is that of the solemn bayous. Worst of all, though, is the shriveling of old fears in the hearts of Kingsport's young men, who grow prone to listen at night to the north wind's faint distant sounds. They swear no harm or pain can inhabit that high peaked cottage, for in the new voices gladdened beats, and with them the tinkle of laughter and music. What tells the sea mist may bring to that haunted and northernmost pinnacle, they do not know, but they long to extract some hint of the wonders that knock at the cliff yawning door when clouds are thickest, and patriarchs dread lest some day, one by one, they seek out the inaccessible peak in the sky, and learn what considered secrets hide beneath the steep singled roof, which is part of the rocks and the stars and the ancient fears of Kingsport. That those venturous youths will come back they do not doubt, but they think a light may be gone from their eyes, and a will from their hearts, and they do not wish quaint Kingsport with its climbing lanes and archaic gables to drag listless down the years, while voice by voice the laughing chorus grows stronger and wilder in that unknown and terrible eyrie, where mist and the dreams of mist stop to rest on their form the sea to the skies. They do not wish the souls of their young men to leave the pleasant hearths and gramble-roofed taverns of old Kingsport, nor do they wish the laughter and song in that high rocky place to grow louder. For as the voice which has come has brought fresh mist from the sea, and from the north's fresh lights, so do they say that still other voices will bring more mist and more lights, till perhaps the olden gods, whose existence they hint only in whispers for fear the congregational person shall hear, may come out of the deep and from unknown Kadaf and the cold waste, and make their dwelling on that evilly appropriate crag, so close to the gentle hill and valley of quiet, simpler fisher folk. This they do not wish, for to plain people things of earth are unwelcome, and besides, the terrible old man often recalls what only said about a knock, and that the lone dweller field and shape sheen black and inquisitive against the mist through those queer translucent windows of leaded bull's eyes. All these things, however, the elder ones may only decide, and meanwhile the morning mist still comes up by that lonely, virtuous peak, that the steep ancient house, that grey, low, caved house, where none is seen, but where evening brings furtive lights, while the north wind tells of strange revels. White and feathery it comes from the deep, to its brothers the clouds, full of dreams of dank pastures and caves of Leviathan, and when tells fly thick in the grottos of Tritons, and conches and seaweed cities blow wind tunes learned from the elder ones, then great eager vapors flock to heaven laden with lore, and Kingsport, nestling uneasy on its lesser cliffs below that awesome hanging sentinel of rock, sees oceanward only a mystic whiteness, as if the cliff's rims were the rim of all earth, and the solemn bells of the bayous tolled free in the aether of fairy. So a pretty awesome story, and in it, you can see how the strange high house in the mist is more or less, a gateway into the dreamlands. We get Father Nodin, we get a mention of Poseidon, Earth gods, Kadaf, the River Sky, Althar, all that stuff. So really, in this awesome Christmas video, we've come full circle from our first video too, because there's a mention of Atlantis and all of that. So I really just, I'm going to read one more thing, and it's a small thing because this video is, going to be like an hour and 15 minutes long by the time I'm done. But I think it's the epitome of all that we've worked for this year as far as the audio books at the Grand Library. And I hope that all of you have enjoyed your stay and your time here. But without further ado, I just want to do a really fun send-off and sing you one last Christmas carol. And by singing, I mean read it. And, of course, we're going to end it on We Wish You a Merry Christmas and phenomenal art. But anyways, without wasting any further time, we wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Good tidings we bring to you and your King. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We all like figgy pudding. We all like figgy pudding. We all like figgy pudding. So bring some out here. We won't go till we get some. We won't go till we get some. We won't go till we get some. So bring some out here. Anyways, I really do wish you all a very Merry Christmas. And I hope you have a Happy New Year. And I hope you've enjoyed all the content that I've made for you this year. And I hope you've enjoyed all the video game streams, all the audiobook streams, all the Chamber of Horrors, and just all the goofy little things that I've been uploading. And I hope that you got everything that you could possibly want for Christmas. Now, I do have one more video for you. And it'll be probably uploaded on New Year's Eve, if not New Year's Day. And I hope that you enjoy it and it helps you start 2025 off with a bang. I'm not going to reveal what story it is because I'm debating on which two stories I think I want it to be. But I think either way you're going to have a wonderful time. And I thank you so much all for coming to the Grand Library and sitting here listening to all of these videos. And I hope, like I said once again, I hope you didn't get cold for Christmas. I hope you got all the gifts that you could possibly want or imagine. So without further ado, that's pretty much it for this video. There's not much more we can add. I look forward to reading to you more Lovecraft and Poe and maybe some Plato and some Conan, because Conan the Barbarian will soon be public domain. So without wasting any more of your time, I hope you have a very wonderful, joyful Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year's. May God bless you, and may you have just a wonderful rest of the month and a Happy New Year, and it's going to be a good one, I can tell you much. Without further ado, your boy Gill-boy's out. Peace out. Love you. God bless you. Bye. Merry Christmas.